So Immortals of Aveum just released tonight. I'm doing this very, very late at night because I want to get this up for you guys tomorrow soon as I can. But this is the newest game that is a AAA game that's going to be talked about from people in articles and YouTube videos and everything like that, because it is actually utilizing Unreal Engine 5.2 to the fullest. It is more than Remnant because it actually is utilizing Nanite and it's utilizing Lumen, which Lumen, for those who aren't aware, the Lumen feature from Unreal Engine 5.2 is actually ray-traced global illumination, meaning that this game's natural lighting mode is ray-traced. This game does not give you an option to turn off ray-traced lighting from Lumen, it is just the default lighting source. So that being said, any computer that does not support ray tracing will have a very, very tough time with this game. But any computer that does support ray tracing will have a decent time with the game, and of course, the more powerful your hardware, the better you're going to have for frame rate. But the question is, because even though it's using ray trace lighting as its default lighting source, that does not mean the game is naturally unoptimized. You can actually have good optimization while using ray trace lighting. It just would mean the game is targeting this newer piece of hardware between the 20 series, 30 series, and 40 series, and it does utilize frame generation on the 40 series as well. So we're here to test out if the game is actually unoptimized or if it's optimized and just does not offer anything other than ray traced lighting, because that's a whole different ballpark. If the game runs good but does not give you the option to turn off ray traced lighting, that's not exactly a bad thing. That's just meaning they're targeting these newer consoles and this newer piece of hardware on PC. This actually would mean that it's a very good PC benchmark if it's optimized. If it's not optimized, then you can probably just skip it and assume it's just going to get optimized later down the road. So I will be testing this game out on my Ryzen 9 5950X RTX 4090 with 32 gigabytes of 3600 megahertz RAM and running the game off of my 980 Pro SSD as well. So I have a pretty high-end system. It's nothing crazy with a 7950X 3D or whatever, but I have a 4090 in my system and I have 32 gigabytes of RAM. So I have a fairly high-end PC and I only play games at 1080p, but I will be testing out 1440p and 4K in this video as well to give you an all-round performance of this as well. So hopping into the settings here, we can go over to the display settings, and you can see I already have the Riva tuner numbers on the right-hand side, and we are going to make sure that we have DLSS on quality there. We have the frame generation on, and you can see that there's not really a whole lot of settings here. So because I have the frame generation on, the reflex mode is on by default, and they do have AMD FSR 2 on as well, so if you did not have DLSS on, you could turn on AMD FSR 2 instead. So switching over to the graphics tab over here, they actually have a really cool system that shows you a GPU and CPU budget. So what this game is doing is it's doing something very unique. It's going through and it's scanning your CPU, your GPU, your RAM, your entire system specs, and every process you have in the background. It is scanning all of those, and it's going to give you a budget. Of course, the budget is basically how much performance you can squeak out of your computer before it starts to impact the performance. You can go over the budget, like you can see I'm already doing that on my CPU side here at a 270 out of 225. You can go over that budget, but it's not recommended if you want to get the best performance. So essentially what it's going to do is the more programs you close out of the background, the more you just let this game focus on your computer, the better the actual, or the bigger the budget will actually be in these graphics options here. So as you go down the menu, you will actually see a blue number and a yellow number, or yellowish orange, a golden number over here as well. What these are is that's again your budget. So these settings, if I change the settings, you can actually see how they're impacting your performance. So you can actually tell what settings are more CPU bound versus GPU bound. So something like texture quality requires more of your GPU because it's more VRAM and it's more just texture loading in general, right? Something like post-processing actually requires both GPU and CPU as you raise it up, so you can see the different budget costs of each piece. So they do offer a lot of flexibility here within the settings. This is actually a really cool feature for a lot of the people that are newer to PCs and don't quite know what each individual setting does. You can just look at these numbers and decide how you want to do your budget for your actual hardware. That's a very cool setting. So now that I have everything turned on to the absolute ultra settings, completely highest everything you could possibly have, let's go ahead and see how this game actually runs. Alright, so we are in the very first walkable section, just after the very beginning intro of the game, and this is really, really pretty, and we're not even in daytime yet. But we are using 22 gigabytes of RAM here, 35% of my CPU, and we're using 82% of my GPU. Again, this is using ray tracing, so you got to understand this is all with ray tracing on as well, and frame generation here as well. So whatever frame rate I'm actually getting, you just divide that by about 2 times, and that's pretty much what I'm getting. So if I'm getting about 140 FPS, I'd be getting about 70 FPS without frame generation. But we're using about 9.6 gigabytes of VRAM here, and this is gorgeous. So normally in a test like this, I would be testing with and without ray tracing on, but there really isn't a ray tracing setting because, again, this game uses Lumen by default. So you are just constantly using ray traced lighting, and so there really is no back and forth A/B testing that I can really do other than showing you how it actually runs, and then again later down the road showing you the 1440p and the 4K results as we go on. So I'm just going to quickly run through, and I'm just going to kind of highlight parts that I think would be good for highlight. Wow, look at this area here. This is just gorgeous. And you can see we're still using about 22 gigabytes of RAM here. We're getting well over 120, 130 FPS. If I look up, it goes more up to like 160, 170 FPS. And we're using about 10 gigabytes of VRAM. So really anything that's not like a 3080, anything with less than 10 gigabytes of VRAM will start to struggle at this point here, especially on ultra settings, even at 1080p. We are using about 80% of the 4090 here as well, which is a good thing to see because that means that we're using more of the 4090 to actually run this game, which is fantastic. So just a quick little check in there, which is just gorgeous. So we are now about 20-ish, maybe 30-ish minutes into me playing here, and it has been butter smooth, about 140 plus FPS, maybe on the low end like 120 FPS. We're still using about 17 gigabytes of RAM, which is lower than before. About 33 to 35% CPU usage and about 80 plus GPU usage, and still not really going above that 10 gigabytes of VRAM, which is really good to see that it's not actually just continuously adding more VRAM to it like with some kind of memory leak. It's staying about 9.9 or about 10 gigabytes in total, which is really good to see. And the frame rate overall is still holding really strong across the board, and the levels look great. The levels look fantastic. We've been in this sprawling little city area here, but overall I'm just really impressed so far, and I don't think it's super unoptimized just yet. I haven't reached the conclusion of unoptimization yet. I think it's just Lumen is really taxing, and a lot of graphics cards don't have the capability of running ray tracing like this without frame generation. So we might be looking at our very first 40 series only next generation game here, because I'm not having issues. Anybody on a 40 series card that I've read so far, they're not having any issues, and it's partly because of that frame generation helping boost the frame rate up even further on top of that as well. So really, we might be looking at our very first ultra next gen game here. So even in this area here, which is more of a tight indoor space, you can really see this lighting just being amazingly gorgeous. The detail on even the railing here is just phenomenal. Like, this is just such a beautiful engine, such a beautiful game, and they are fully utilizing it to the fullest, even with the bookshelf detail over here with the books having really high quality. Like, you can just see all of the detail they packed into this game with just little tiny objects here and there just being crammed with detail, and the texture quality being really high quality textures across the board. Wow, look at that lighting though. Like, how cool is that? That's really cool looking. And again, the detail all the way down to the actual railing here, the design inside of it is just phenomenal, and the shadowing behind it is just perfect. It's so good. That's what Lumen does. It's so easy for them to just put up a couple light sources and have it just naturally illuminate the entire area, and that is just perfect. It looks so cool. So here's our first bit of actual combat, and the particles are going crazy. We're still holding over 100 FPS though, which is impressive. 17 gigabytes of RAM. We're actually using quite a good chunk of my CPU, which is actually nice to see. We're using about 80% of our GPU here. We're finally over that 10 gigabytes of RAM here, which makes sense given all the enemies and the particles and the craziness that's going on here. That actually was not bad for the first bit of combat. That held out pretty well. Alright, so I just made it to this area, and look at this level design, guys. This is just insane. The lighting looks amazing, the level design looks fantastic, the detail, the texture quality, the everything so far has been phenomenal. The character quality and the NPCs and everything like that look phenomenal. In the cutscenes, they just look stellar. And as you can see, we're using about 90% of our GPU, if not higher, 8.7 gigabytes of our video memory, of our VRAM there. We're using maybe 30% of our CPU, depending on where I'm looking or what's happening. We are using 17 to 18 gigabytes of RAM, and we're getting over 200 FPS at 1080p with the frame generation on. So I personally, I know you're going to read the opposite about this in the Steam reviews and articles online and videos online. You are going to read and hear the opposite, but I can't say this game is unoptimized. I can't. What I think is actually happening is this game is dedicated towards the new hardware. If you have something like a 3080, a 3090, 3090 Ti, or even like a 4070, 4080, 4090, you are going to be able to play this game very, very smoothly on high to ultra settings just fine. And especially if you have a 40 series card with frame generation on, you will have even less issues. This is where I believe this game is targeting next generation hardware. Whether it be the new consoles or whether it be PC hardware with ray tracing capabilities, I just can't say this game is unoptimized. I haven't really had many performance issues with it. I haven't had massive stuttering. I haven't had crazy bad load areas or whatever. I haven't had shader compilation issues. I haven't had really anything like that. The game has been butter smooth for me the entire frickin' time. So for me personally right now, I can't say it's unoptimized because I haven't had many issues with it. Granted, I am running on a top of the line GPU right now. I'm running on the highest end you can have, which is a 4090. But like I said, anything with like good VRAM capabilities or anything with a good ray tracing capabilities should be able to play this game very, very easily, or at least on like high to ultra settings, kind of mixing and matching the settings as you need to maximize your frame rate. So this game honestly is surprising me with the visuals and the performance of it too. I was expecting to go into this game and have tons of stutters and frame drops even on a 4090 at 1080p, but you can see here I'm getting almost 200 FPS across the board. With no frame stutters, it's very smooth. It is honestly incredible to play with this. It feels so butter smooth. The movement feels fantastic. The shooting feels really good. It doesn't stutter when you're breaking a bunch of objects or whatever. Like, you can actually speed through levels and there's a bunch of chaos that can happen and destruction that can happen, and it just handles it. It's smooth. It's like they actually took their time to optimize it. By far, the number one thing you're going to see people talk about is the game not running well, but the only reason it's not going to run well is if you can't run ray tracing on your lighting systems. Like, that's what Lumen is. It's ray traced lighting. So if you can run this lighting, it's going to be fine. Okay, so really quickly, I'm going to up the quality to 1440p, and then we're going to come back and we're going to look at this area in a 1440p setting here. So I will be right back in just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and turn the game into 1440p, and I'll see you guys in a second. Alright, so here we are at 1440p. Full transparency here from the YouTube behind the scenes side of things. Normally when I do a benchmark like this and I want to increase the resolution, I have to like force my monitor to be 1440p or force it to be 4K for the settings to actually take effect. This game though, easy, super easy. I just go into the game, I make it full screen, I put it to 1440p because of the DSR factors in the NVIDIA control panel, and I just hit apply, and it's now 1440p. So this is now the 1440p version of this game. And as you can see, we are getting well over 144 FPS in this game. So you could very easily get the 144 Hz monitors at 1440p and just be able to run it without a problem. We are using about 97% of our GPU here though, with 9.9 gigabytes of VRAM and 18 gigabytes of RAM, but the frame rate is super stable. So like, none of this is even a problem for us right now. At 1440p, easy 150 FPS average, I would say. And if we keep running forward, if we just keep doing all of our stuff, doing all of our lungy stuff and doing everything that we can do to try to drop the frame rates or whatever, to kind of shoot some stuff, break some of these containers around, like, let's see if we can get that one, drop into 143 there, running to the new area. Like, it is just handling it like a champ. It is gorgeous. I am loving this. Alright, so now the real test is how does this game run at 4K on a 4090, 5950X, everything on high settings, ultra settings, whatever it is. Let's see what this game runs like at 4K. Alright, so there you go. The game is now running at 4K. Once again, super easy to change that. I love when games allow super easy resolution changes. That makes my job a ton easier, so that's huge credit to that. But you can see that we're getting about 90 FPS here in 4K, which is really, really nice. super butter smooth, super fantastic. I am really, really loving this. We're using about 97% of our GPU here, getting about 12 and a half gigabytes of VRAM being used, 18 gigabytes of RAM. So again, the RAM isn't even being flexed here. That's why I don't think this game is unoptimized. I really think this game has had a lot of work put into the optimization to it, and the team deserve a lot of credit for this. The only bad part about the game is the game does not let you turn off the lumen system in Unreal Engine. And the reason for that, by the way, is simply because they did not design the game with any other lighting in mind. There's no like baked lighting or any rasterized lighting or nothing like that. It's just lumen. It's just ray trace. They just dragged a bunch of light sources around until it looked nice, and then that's all they do. And they're letting lumen do all the hard work for them, which is a super smart technique for saving time. But now what they're dealing with is anybody who cannot handle ray traced global illumination at all. Anything that's lower than like a 2080 or 2070, anything that can't really do ray tracing is now going to suffer for performance. So you're going to have this ginormous like disparity and gap between the high-end hardware and the low-end hardware, where the low-end hardware is going to call this game broken, unoptimized, stupid, and just bad, or whatever they're going to call it. But then the high-end hardware will be doing stuff like this, where you're almost getting over 100 FPS in this game at 4K. Like, it's just insane the difference that it can make by having high-end hardware for a game like this. Like, you can see if I run up to here and I just start breaking stuff, oops, if I break it, like, we dropped to about 84 FPS there. If I just keep running and doing my little lunge attack and whatever, I start shooting stuff, like, it is just handling it. So 4K on a 4090 on this game is easy. Easy. So we are using about 19 gigabytes of VRAM, 16% of our CPU. So like, of course, now we're GPU bottlenecked because of the fact that we're running at 4K with ray tracing on, which is the lumen. We're using about 12 and a half gigabytes of RAM still, and we're using 97% or 95-ish% of our GPU, which is just really good to see. And here's something else I can actually credit them with as well, is that with other Unreal Engine games, something like Hogwarts Legacy, for example, every time you open the game, you have to recompile the shaders for like 2 minutes, and it sucks. What this game does, though, instead of Hogwarts Legacy's tactic of doing it every time you reopen the game, this game will only do it for like 5 seconds. Not even that. It's like just a quick flash of optimizing game files, and then it goes right into the main menu. And the best part is that once you're in game, at least through the prologue up to this area that I'm at now, once you're in the game, there's no like random stutters and shader compilation issues. Like, there's none of those typical UE5 problems. Now, I don't know how it's going to go later in the game, but as of right now, it is super clean. I am loving what they've done, and again, my final verdict is this game is not unoptimized. This game is a beefy next-gen title. That's what this is. We are finally seeing a game that is pushing Unreal Engine to its limit, pushing PCs, pushing consoles to its limit. That's what this game is going to do, especially because they're only giving you one option for lighting, which is lumen. Now, until they may give you an option to turn off lumen in the future, but as of right now, as of the launch of this game only gives you the option for ray traced lumen lighting. So before you make your purchase and then end up making a bad Steam review, just go into this knowing that if you have a lower end piece of hardware, something that's below a 2080 Super, you will probably have a bad time with this game because it defaults to a ray traced lighting system. So this is where it's up to the viewers and the consumers to do their due diligence to know what their hardware can handle. And if you're running something like a 4060, 4070, or even like a 3070 or something like that, 3060 Ti, whatever it is, you should be able to get about 40 to 50 FPS in this game at like medium settings or high settings. Like, it won't be unplayable. It's just the better your graphics card performs with ray tracing, the better this game will perform for you. And then, of course, the 4060 and 4070 have the cheat code of turning on the frame generation, which is helping us quite a bit here. That's what's pushing us over 100 FPS at 4K, is the fact that with frame generation, I'm basically doubling my FPS here. So I'd be normally getting about 40 to 50, but with frame generation, it's now 80 to 100. And mind you, I have not adjusted the DLSS quality at all. We are still on the quality mode for this entire testing. So if you don't mind going to like balanced or performance or ultra performance for your playthrough, you probably could squeeze out an extra 10 to 15 FPS from this as well. So overall, I cannot say this game is unoptimized, at least not in my testing in this video. This is my conclusion. This game is not unoptimized and actually does a very good job handling what you're able to use. Like, it does a very good job at making sure that whatever hardware you have can have a playable experience, especially if you have the hardware that's like, again, the newer hardware, the next gen hardware, the 4000 series, or even like a 3080, 3090, or 3090 Ti, you should be fine. If you can use frame generation on a 40 series, you should be fine. Will you be able to run this game on like maximum ultra settings? Maybe not. You might have to do medium to high settings, but it should be playable. I don't think this game is unoptimized. I think it's just a next-gen title targeting next-gen hardware. I say kudos to the developers, and I say kudos to the optimization team as well, the engineers behind this, the people that really worked their butts off to make this happen, to make this game run as smooth as it is. And maybe I'll eat my words whenever I'm further into the game and it has a bit of stuttering issues or some other lag problems or whatever, but we'll see how that goes when we're later in the game. As of right now, this game is actually surprising me with how good it runs. So thank you so much for watching, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Hopefully this helped you make an informed decision on whether or not your PC can run Immortals of Aveum and whether or not you should actually purchase the game to play on your PC. Let me know how the game runs for you on your machine and on your hardware and what you think of the game as well. Like the video if you guys enjoyed, subscribe if you guys are new, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.